What happens when you're handed a 15-year-old patient transport system full of passionate professionals, tightly held processes, and a whole lot of red tape? In this episode of Busting Roadblocks, I talked to Leanne, a GM who took on the challenge of operational transformation in one of the most complex stakeholder environments you can imagine. Paramedics, pilots, hospitals, and government procurement, all in the mix. She faced the classic line, "It's not perfect, but it's how we've always done it." But by holding hands across functions, from the CEO to the bedside nurse, and by making space for real conversations, Leanne helped build a system that didn't leave anyone behind. This one's all about communication, courage, and creating change that sticks. Welcome to Busting Roadblocks, the podcast where we break down the biggest roadblocks in business and help you clear a path to success. I'm Janet Charteris, your host and the founder of JC Consultancy, where we help businesses remove barriers and unlock their full potential. Today, we get to hear from Leanne Simpson, professional risk and resilience expert. It doesn't completely sum it up, but Leanne, your work life spans Royal Flying Doctor Service, Department of Justice and Community Safety, emergency management, paramedic. Clearly, assessing and dealing with risk is in your blood. Now, I met Leanne at a business consulting program we are both part of. Welcome, Leanne.
Thanks, Janet. It's really great to be here. I'm excited to see where this conversation takes us because I think Busting Roadblocks is right up my alley.
Absolutely. Now, I looked at your work experience and it covers a lot of risk management roles. And now, obviously, in your coaching and consulting world, you've worked across New Zealand and Australia. You have worked with the Flying Doctors, and my sister has also worked with the Flying Doctors. So I know you've got stories, probably not for this podcast, but definitely if anyone else wants Flying Doctor stories, you would have some gems, I'm sure. We have a specific operational transformational example we're going to cover today. Now, although it's centered around the hospital environment, from what you've told me briefly about the story, a lot of this crosses industries, and I know I've come up against this. So set the scene for us. Who are we dealing with?
Well, dealing with a really complex stakeholder group is the first thing, and some ways of working that have been set in stone and entrenched for a really long period of time, both within the organisation I was supporting this transformation with, the organisations who were on the receiving end of the services, as well as those who hold the contracts and manage them from a procurement perspective. So really complex stakeholder group, a lot at stake for the business as well, because it was a risky move to say we're going to flip the lid on how we deliver operationally and from a service perspective. Yeah, good chunky problem to get into.
Yeah, so where are we? Where are we in? Where in the environment are you attacking this from? Because I know you've talked about procurement at this end and the people who receive the service. So you're somewhere in the middle. Whereabouts are we?
I was the general manager of the particular business area that delivered the services, which was specifically non-emergency patient transport and road and air. Right. It spanned the state of Victoria and snuck into a little bit of New South Wales from a road perspective as well. And the Flying Doctor, it's an organisation that many people are super familiar with. Their remit is really in that rural and regional environment, getting help to where it is needed. Victoria was the first place that actually tackled the non-emergency patient transport side of things. Okay. And that was probably close to 15 years ago that they embarked on that type of service delivery. So yeah, my role was as the head of that business area, and I was brought in because they fundamentally needed to do something different.
Okay, so where were they before? So what were the key problems that you noticed when you walked into this business?
Yeah, so it was walk in and hit the ground running situation because, they really did need something different. What I noticed was an organisation that was struggling to actually maintain sustainability, viability. People who really cared about their work, which is why I was attracted to the organisation in the first place. It was kind of a full circle thing for me, and people who are really purpose driven, and a sector that was in desperate need of a shake up, really. from a service delivery point of view, the way of working across the industry of non-emergency patient transport was established, and it's almost been a set and forget. And the way they operate has been very much almost like a taxi service. It's a fairly crass way of describing it, but it's kind of a you call, we haul type arrangement, instead of actually looking at the metrics and matching service to demand, which was a real opportunity. So that was those were the things that I saw coming in. The other element that I would throw in the mix is really tough industrial environment from an enterprise agreement point of view. Lots of complexity in that space as well. So heaps of moving parts.
Yeah, and you get that in the healthcare profession, which is great in terms of protecting the people who work in the industry, because they absolutely need to be protected, because they could easily be taken advantage of. But the other side, when you're trying to bring in change, you're not just talking to your group in front of you, you're talking to multiple levels to get any kind of change into it. So we're looking at, I guess, the big roadblocks are, well, there's lots, to be honest. Let's pick one. But you've got a group who have implemented a really good initiative. They just did it and kept going. And then as part of that, you have that mentality of, we've always done it this way, so it's fine. It's not broken. Why are we looking to fix it? But I guess underlying that, you've got these passionate people who patient care is really important to them. Otherwise, they wouldn't be in this profession. There's plenty of other ways to make money, and looking after patients is definitely not the easiest way to do it. Is there any other added complexity? I think you said something about procurement at the start there. Is there any fun things with them? I'm sure there is.
Yeah, so the way the contracts were managed across the state were also quite well entrenched and really hadn't moved from when they were initiated. And it was a solid 15 years earlier that the sort of sector started to get legs. And there'd not really been any innovation in how contracts were presented, and pricing models and structures and service delivery models. There had been a lot of just rolling over of practice over a really long period of time, and increasingly, I think it's fair to say that was eroding margins for businesses and making it really hard to actually deliver the service and maintain the business.
So was it a case of that the same suppliers had always done it, but had to do it at the same price, even though all of the inflationary pressure was coming on?
That's a pretty good summary, but there were also new competitors coming into the market as well. So the market probably started out really small. It has expanded and competition is good, but the ability to actually bring in true competition and innovate has been quite restrictive.
Yeah, and is that because there's a massive government process behind all of this? It's not just as simple as saying we can fly and we can fit a patient in the back. You need to have all of that OH&S element to it as well.
Oh, absolutely. Hugely, very, very highly regulated industry. And that's, as you rightly said earlier on, it's around patient safety. It's also about the care delivery. A lot of people mistakenly think that non-emergency patient transport means a driver, and it's totally not the case. The staff who provide those services on behalf of the organisations are well trained. Our cohort of staff, as it were, at the time, there was a real mix of paramedics, registered nurses. So there's capabilities that extended the spectrum. It was just around where they chose to deliver those skill sets. So heaps of regulation from that point of view as well, on equipment that you could use, the vehicles that you could use, all the logistics of how the system operated. There are really strict guidelines around what could be activated and how it could be activated. And again, all of that sort of amplified the inability to innovate.
Yeah, because there's a lot more pressure. I think if I think of my world in my past, innovating and changing the flavour of a biscuit, easy, we can do it. It's low risk, no one's really going to get hurt. And I actually saw a post recently on LinkedIn talking about how people keep on going, let's go fast. And you're like, yes, but if it's a massive IT system, we don't want to go too fast. And if it's patient care, we really don't want to go too fast. But if it's just the flavour of a biscuit, go for it, run for it. So it's appropriate measures for the situation that's in front of you. So you've got all of this regulation, all of these entrenched attitudes. You've got an environment where you've got skilled people, so you've got to really look after them, as well as they're highly unionized. It sounds like a nightmare, honestly. Like, just pick one of them and solve them. And it doesn't sound like something you could easily solve by just going, this is best practice, let's go. It sounds to me like it's going to require quite a few soft skills combined with clear and actionable direction.
Yeah.
How did you solve it?
Yeah, no, yeah, that's a really good summary. I will just add, though, picking up on your point around the speed that you can move at, because that's really critical. And even complex things like this, sometimes you have to move really fast. And I've been in similar situations in other organizations where you actually don't have time to take 18 months to get the thing done. You've actually got to hit it hard and fast. I guess those soft skills that you referred to, you can only move at the speed of trust.
Yeah.
So the ability to connect with people early on and really engage meaningfully, co-design where it's appropriate, and be transparent about what's at stake. Those were all really key for me. And that was with every stakeholder, and making sure I got the right people in the room at the right time as well. So I was dealing with all levels of organizations on the customer end,
yeah,
to make sure that the people that our crews interfaced with understood what was going on, but also the people who were, the CFOs in the background who were actually managing the contracts, chief risk officers, the CEOs as well. So that C-suite were really engaged about what the objectives were and why it was going to be of benefit, as much as the frontline teams understood what it meant for them and what would look different.
Yeah.
And then, of course, there's the contractual management elements of negotiating those. But more importantly to me was the work I did with teams within the organisation and making sure that they understood what we were doing and why we were doing it, because it meant changing their working arrangements. It meant changing rosters, changing shift lengths, because the modelling and the data analysis that I did was all around giving us a really solid position to say, this is where we know the work is and when it happens, and let's match our resources to that, and what's the smartest way to achieve that. So it's really important that people understood the motives behind the decisions that were made and the actions. So there was a lot of consultation. Not everybody loved it, but enough that people really did understand the possibility of what we could create together, that they got behind it. And I still am eternally grateful for the staff who backed the initiatives and really got behind it, because we changed things at every level in the organisation. We changed how we recruited, we changed how we rostered crews, how we put people together to get the best outcome for patients. And we changed the model of working in terms of, rather than just serving one customer at a time, we looked at customers as a collective to get the best result for the greater good. So huge changes, but it all comes down to communication.
Yeah, I was about to say, I'm hearing all that, and all I'm thinking is the only way you could have executed that is with strong communication skills.
Yeah.
And I think what people probably aren't understanding, or maybe they are, is that you went from C-suite, frontline customers, into your frontline staff. So that different levels of communication is actually quite a skill, and getting everyone to understand. They don't have to agree, but they have to understand and hopefully align with what you're doing. And that's three very different conversations, but same.
No, that's absolutely correct. It is different conversations, but it's critical to actually move fast when you need to. You've got to get all those touch points, because if you miss one of them, it'll break down.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that.
So you said that trust was key, and I quite like that, because I think trust is a word that's overused a lot, and particularly, again, when you're working across those three different types of communication, they all want to hear the truth for whatever that looks like, and that's how you build trust. But how and what the truth looks like for each level is quite difficult and different. So it was started off with, I guess, a solid understanding of what was going on, and then developing a strategy that you needed tons of stakeholder engagement, and then almost selling the plan and holding their hand as you went through it.
Yep. That pretty much says it. And also iterating as we went. So, I could not possibly sit here and say that everything went smoothly. There were opportunities where we went, that's not quite right. We need to tweak that and adjust it.
Yeah.
So it was a really iterative process, but we moved fast. So I had a team of people who were watching really closely what we were doing and where it was working and where it wasn't, so that we could make those adjustments quickly.
Yeah.
Also set up really good feedback loops so that people could come back to us with their observations of what it was like to be on the receiving end of the new way of working as well. That was super important.
Yeah.
And being available to have the conversations. I think the one thing that really stood out for me in the whole process was I had the vision in my head. I knew the potential of what we could achieve. It takes longer than you think to get everybody else to the same place. And it's a failing on my part, but I continually underestimate how much conversation you need to have. And anybody I'm talking about who are embarking on similar sort of things, you've really got to build it in. You've got to build in the time and space to be available, to respond to their concerns, their fears, because ultimately the buy-in is connected to them fully understanding what's in it for them.
Yeah.
And what it means for them. So it's an investment in its own right.
Yeah. But I mean, that's critical, right? Because if you don't have their buy-in, it's not going to work.
No.
So we have an outcome that wasn't pretty, it wasn't straight line. And actually, if we use all that management speak, you are using agile and you are, but you're doing it in a safer environment. I love the fact that you had that feedback loop. I think the hardest thing with feedback loops, particularly if you're more junior in this journey, and this is not speaking to you, but for people who are, is you've got to filter through this is too hard for me stuff and I'm going to react versus the actual feedback that means something and means you need to make adjustments. So the outcome, did we land where we wanted to, and did it have influence beyond just what you guys were doing?
Yeah, it definitely did have influence. So it proved the point that things could be done differently is the first thing, which I always love. I like those projects where people say, you can't possibly do that. Just watch this. But so that was really great. The outcomes that we actually had for our staff, was huge. I've said it earlier, the people who do this sort of work do it because they really care and they want to do meaningful work. So by matching the service with the demand and being really considered about who we crewed together and what shifts we put them on, we actually positioned them to be doing the work that they were qualified to be doing, that they were best placed to be doing, that gave the patients the best outcomes. We created an enabling environment for them to really do their best work. So that was amazing from my perspective, because it's something that I love to activate when I'm going into organizations. The second thing for our customers, we actually managed to deliver better outcomes from them, because everything from an external agency point of view, like non-emergency transport, has that interface and interaction creates flow-on effects for their patient flow patterns. And the way we were working was it actually demonstrably improved patient flow at the hospitals. And a key principle that I adopted right from the outset was that no hospital would get left behind. A bit of a nerdy little phrase.
Army thing.
It is, but it was super important because some of the hospitals that we were serving were super remote and had really low demand requirements. So by adopting this new model and clustering and thinking and breaking down silos between these hospitals, we actually got them the at least equivalent service, if not better service, by treating them as a collective rather than individual entities. So that was huge as well. And that was a core objective of mine going into it, is that I didn't want to see any organization left out of the mix. If they wanted to be in, we would find a way of making it happen. And lastly, from an operational point of view and organizational point of view, the efficiencies really started to shine through, which was great. And that's in terms of operational and financial opportunities. It was a really great project to lead.
Yeah, I bet. Sounds like a really good meaty one. Well, like I said, I think there was some key bits in there. Obviously, not all of us are going to live in this environment that's so high stress and has such critical outcomes if you get it wrong. But I think changing established thought processes, I think most people have come up against that in senior management, and it's an incredibly difficult one to do whilst maintaining your bosses. And that's more often than not when you're in that level at the board and you're going, okay, I know you want this, but I've got to get everyone on board and I've got to get them along with me. So yeah. I reckon that would have set you up perfectly for consulting, to be honest, because juggling all those balls and still playing kind of Switzerland but not Switzerland must be amazing. Tell us, what are you doing now? How do we get hold of you?
Yeah, I am offering a portfolio of services, and they all, in my mind, connect really nicely and seamlessly into each other because I like big juicy problems and I like to ask a lot of questions. So executive and organizational coaching, advisory board services, and interim and fractional executive positioning where it's appropriate in order to provide support, solve problems. How to find me? LinkedIn is the easiest way to find me, and I'm happy to be connected there for people to reach out to me, or my company page, which is also on LinkedIn as well, which is Critical Connections.
Cool. And we will definitely be putting that in the description in these podcasts so people will be able to get hold of you. Thank you so much for your time and sharing your experiences with our audience. And I found it invaluable myself because it's always good to hear how other people do it. You can only learn from, I think, people who have been in the trenches and have been part of those imperfect experiences that bring out the real gems of how you do this. If you found this podcast valuable, make sure you subscribe and share it with your network. And if you have a business challenge you'd like me to cover, reach out on LinkedIn or at janet@jcconsultancy.co. I'd love to hear your thoughts. What roadblocks are you facing right now?